Well, hi, everybody. Welcome. My name is Ezra. I lead customer success here at OpsLevel, and today we're going to be talking about DevEx Fundamentals, unlocking workflow automation with service ownership. We're talking about workflow automation. We're going to talk about ownership. We're going to talk about OpsLevel. I'm also joined. Sorry, I should talk about who I am. So I'm Ezra. I'm in addition to leading customer success, I'm also one of our customer success managers. So I work with a subset of our customers on implementation, onboarding, best practice adoption, making sure they get value from our tool. If you are an existing OpsLevel customer, you might work with me or one of my colleagues. And if you're a future OpsLevel customer, then you might get a chance to work with me or a member of my team to move forward. And I'm joined by Kyle from our platform team. Kyle, if you want to introduce yourself. Kyle, who are you and what does the platform team do at OpsLevel?
So I am the platform engineering manager at OpsLevel, and we're responsible for two main pillars: the infrastructure that the application itself runs on and all the details that entails, but also the customer-facing tools, the CLI, the Terraform provider, our Kubernetes integration. Those are written by the team that I manage. So we kind of have this nice blend of writing customer-facing things that we would, as a platform engineer, also use internally if we were to implement OpsLevel ourselves, which we do. We run OpsLevel on OpsLevel, so we improve our maturity and our standards and make everyone have great DevEx at this company.
Great. And one thing I should say, so Kyle and I work together most regularly, both when we're talking about new customer-facing features, but also Kyle's team owns OpsLevel's own OpsLevel instance. Is also owned by Kyle's team. I am currently OpsLevel's own CSM. So that's usually where Kyle interact as OpsLevel itself. We're not an ideal OpsLevel customer we're a little too small, but we are certainly we do leverage it and we do use it internally, and we'll have to talk about that later if folks are interested. Okay, so we're going to dive right in. I see there's something in chat about chat being disabled. Okay, I will trust one of our helpful other people to manage that. Okay, great. Let's dive in. So what we're going to do today, we only have the two topics, so we're going to keep it pretty easy. We're going to talk about ownership, developer experience, and automation. We abbreviate developer experience as DevEx. We'll talk about what that means later on. And then we're going to do a quick demo of OpsLevel and how OpsLevel can help. If you are not an OpsLevel customer, but this is still a topic that's interesting to you, we're going to talk about OpsLevel because, as our t-shirts and Zoom backgrounds might suggest, that is sort of where we come from here. But the hope is that the things we're going to talk about, the attributes of software, will be helpful in any sort of developer portal that you're going to build, right? You're going to build general principles we think you should adopt in order to deliver good software, right? Our hope is that this is generalizable, though, fair warning, it's going to be pretty OpsLevel heavy, especially in that second section where we're going to go into the product and talk through in more detail. A couple of just logistical notes. So if you are not a current OpsLevel customer and just want to see what's going on, you can go to OpsLevel.com and get a free trial. No need to talk to a salesperson, no need to put in a credit card. You can just sign up with your work email and you should get an OpsLevel trial revision. If you do have questions, thoughts, feelings, things you want us to address, throw them into the Q&A. Some we might be able to address as we go. Others we'll definitely have time at the end to address these questions live on either any of the topics we're covering here or just general questions. If you have other things, we'd be happy to talk through those. And finally, you're welcome to take screenshots, I suppose, or recordings if you want, but we are going to share actual recording of this afterward. So feel free to wait and receive that. But there's no need to take too many notes or dive too deep into this as we go. It'll all be shared afterward. If you're an existing OpsLevel customer also, I should flag, and you want to talk about this in more detail, talk to your customer success manager. We'd be very happy to go over this in much more detail and relate as to your specific account. If you're not an OpsLevel customer, become one, and then you'll have that same privilege, right? We can go from there. Okay, so I'm going to dive right in. Looks like chat might be disabled. All right, well, Cody or Megan, if you folks are on the line, maybe you can help with that, but we're going to keep rolling. So the thing we want to start with is framing this problem, which is we hopefully all on this webinar, and assuming you're interested or currently using OpsLevel, you are a developer portal, you have this idea of DevOps as a thing, right? This notion that the best way to ship good software quickly is to consolidate responsibility for both sides of both building and deploying into one group of humans, right? One team should be also responsible for those activities. You build it, you own it, right? That famous YBYO acronym, right? All this is good. We're not going to talk about why that's good. I'm assuming you already believe that. What we're going to talk about here is there's a downside to that approach. And the downside, or the negative externality, is toil. And I mean by toil is developers who in the past, in the bad old days, were able to just write features and then throw them over the wall. Now a bunch of other stuff they have to do. And it's stuff that is often difficult, and it's tooling that they're often unfamiliar with, and it is often not particularly well structured for them to do these things. Deploying, troubleshooting, going on call, right? All these various operational tasks are now A, tricky, and B, hard for these folks to do. It's not a traditional part of the job description. On the flip side, the former ops people who are now running platform DevOps, SRE, DevEx groups within their respective companies, in the past would have just like, we're able to write code. It's like, okay, everyone, stop building things we're not going to do any deploys for a while. We're just going to upgrade everyone and it'll be fine. We'll move on. Now they're running change management systems where they need to have each team do each of these upgrades, each of these changes. And so they're faced with a different suite of challenges from they were faced before. And all of this together leads to bad developer experience. Right? It means that developers have a worse time, and companies that are able to mitigate these challenges have a better time, and companies that are not are going to have a worse time. But what is developer experience? Feels like an important thing. So, right, that's the challenge. It's a natural byproduct of this DevOps approach. DevOps is good, not all good, right? There are some downsides to it, and and the way we manifest those harms in the form of developer experience. So, what is developer experience? Let's talk about that quickly. So we at OpsLevel have lots of thoughts and feelings about developer experience. It's one of those terms that you can Google and find all sorts of definitions. I think the one way to think about it is it's about effective and efficient code delivery. Probably easy, we can quibble, it's cultural, it's technological, it's based around tooling, but all of it comes down to, can developers, do they have a good time at work? Right? Can they move quickly, move efficiently, build the things they want to build, ship the things they want to ship? And so what we're going to talk about today across these 4 pillars. We're going to not talk about these 2 really. Another time, we'll get deep into cataloging and ownership and tooling. We'll talk about that briefly. What we're really focused on here is around how we do operations and how we drive an ownership culture, and what ownership means are the 2 focuses that we're going to talk through today. So I'll stop here. I don't know if there's anything we should go on. Oh, it's back. I see. Great. Anything we should talk about in terms of chat or in terms of, it looks like there are no urgent questions and I keep going, but this is generally speaking like where we're going to focus. Okay. So in that context, this is like the whole presentation in one slide, right? If you learn nothing else today, like here's the slide we think encapsulates this. We think there is the possibility to build a virtuous cycle in which notions of ownership help drive automation, and automation eases ownership. And to explain what I mean, so you have this idea of ownership, where people, instead of asking for help, try first to do it themselves, right? They know this is their job to help my service migrate, help my service deploy, help my service ensure my services do these things, right? I own this service, I'm going to be responsible for it. And what that does is it frees up, hopefully your platform team, so more time building great tooling. And the tooling that they're going to build, or the tooling they'll provide, I don't know exactly if they use the tool or they ship the tool, with verbs here are tricky, but the tooling they provide in turn should make ownership easier, right? We're going to give you this weird part of what it means to own a service is to do X, but we're going to make it easy to do X because we're going to give you a tool that'll help you do it, or make it easier for you to do it on your own. And the idea is that in turn makes it easier to drive ownership. That renewed sense of ownership in turn enables an automation. And this also exists because the other reason this flywheel pushes is around the catalog itself. Part of what it means to own is to document, and that documentation allows us to write on scripts on top of it, right? You can't automate what you can't reflect in data, and part of what it means to own is to reflect something in data. Kyle, I'm going to throw this to you. I think this is a good time. I think you have an anecdote here from your time at Under Armour, but I'll let you talk about,
Yeah, so I used to work at a previous company before OpsLevel that actually used OpsLevel. And we knew we had a problem with just understanding how much stuff we actually had. and who was responsible for it. So we got, we tried the spreadsheet method. It was, rough, but we got OpsLevel and we started cataloging everything, and we started making sure that ownership was assigned to all of these things. And all said and done, we realized that we actually had a team. We knew we had hundreds of things at the company, but we didn't know, how that disbursement was actually dispersed across all the teams we had. We realized that we had a team of 5 people who were responsible for 70 services. And you just kind of do the math there. That's a lot of services per person on the team. Or we also had teams that had, 10 people responsible for 3 services or something like that. So what that ownership allows you to do is make decision points or talking points as a company to improve that. And it doesn't necessarily have to be automation, but we could have done things. We could have used that data to drive some automation. But in this case, we specifically found that this team is way overburdened. Do we need to give them more support? Is there stuff that the platform team needs to build to make it so they can manage 70 services? Whatever was, whatever constraints we were working in as a business, we are able to have those discussion points and then drive a path forward. I have another anecdote on repo ownership. So when I came to OpsLevel, there were hundreds of repos that we had, and no one was necessarily owning them, or it was, just something that was created and spun up, and maybe someone did something with it. So one of the first things I said about because I knew this ownership was so powerful, as I tried to get every single repo owned by a team. And what we found out through doing that exercise is that there were libraries that we had forked from the open source where we needed to make a tweak or a change so that we could actually use it or fix some sort of bug in our product that we no longer needed to maintain anymore. The change had either made it upstream, or the upstream had fixed the problem in a different way, and we could move off of that. But I think the important piece here is that I was able to reach out to people, or what I could have done had it been a lot of unowned repos is built automation to reach out to people on my behalf to drive, like, do you own this thing? Why do we need this thing? Basically use it as a talking point or a sync point to make improvements. And if you as a dev have less repos to own or less things to own, that also increases your DevEx, not just the standard things that you think of, like push a button and build some infrastructure, or push a button and I escalate my privileges. Those things come too from having standards in your catalog's metadata, but there's other side benefits that come from this great ownership that improve DevEx as well.
Yeah, I think one thing to highlight there also is both of these things, like how critical these are going to be and what they're going to look like, is going to be a function of scale. We're not going to get too deep into that in this particular webinar today, but if you're at our scale with 20 some odd devs, how many devs do we have at OpsLevel? I don't know. So
Yeah,
somewhere
25,
in that,
30.
Yeah, somewhere in that range, versus we have customers, who have thousands. It meaningfully changes both how ownership is going to function and also the returns on investment from automation. Right, automating repo ownership at our scale make less sense. Automating when you have thousands of repos and hundreds of teams all of a sudden becomes not just a good idea, but seemingly like the returns are tremendous if you're able to automate.
Yep.
Okay, so we're gonna keep rolling. One thing I want to talk about here is, so automation, I think I hopefully have an idea what this means. I want to dig a little bit more into what we mean by ownership, what that looks like for our customers. So for us, we think about it as being accountable for the software that you own and operate, right? It's kind of a feeling, right? Like I know it when I see it, right? Ownership is people's first assumption is not, I don't know how to do this, who has to do this for me, but this is my responsibility, right? This breaks, it's my fault. I need to figure out how to fix it. Or I need to raise my hand and ask for help, but I'm ultimately the one who's going to do it. For us, when we think about ownership, there are 3 questions. This is like a good topic for a second webinar. Well, stay tuned. Maybe we'll talk about this another time. But we think about who is responsible for ownership culture, right? Who owns ownership at your organization? How is it defined, right? I own this service. I own this repo. Cool. What does that mean? Like, what do you have to do? What do you not have to do? What is involved? What does it mean at our company to do this thing, right? So we have a team that's going to set a standard. We have a clear standard that's set. And then finally, where can I find this information? How do I know who owns what? How do I know what's required of me, right? That definition is accessible. It is easy for me to find and get to. So another way to frame this is we think about your ownership team. Again, I use ownership team. I could use platform team. This team goes by many names. This is the team at your company that should be defining what ownership is. Sometimes called DevEx, sometimes called DevOps, sometimes called it's just a bunch of architects hanging out, doing their best. It's depending on the scale, right, of your company, might change the answer here. Maybe you have a dedicated SRE function. Somebody somewhere should define what ownership is, and that team should think very carefully about how they're spending their time, which is if they are spending their time doing one-off tasks, right? Are they deploying services? Are they working? Are they going on call, right? Do you still have a NOC that you're operating alongside your like actual regular services? Or my fish versus teaching a person to fish metaphor here, right? Are they building tooling to make it easier for us to build good software, right? Are they building the tools? Are they building automation? Are they enabling people to hit buttons rather than have to go learn a brand new tool to do these things? So that's mostly what I want to talk about today before I get into how OpsLevel can help you do all these things. Kyle, I don't know if you want to have any more anecdotes here you want to talk through,
Yeah.
we can move on.
I do have an anecdote on the building tooling to make it easier for others to do their job. So an example I have is we adopted PagerDuty, and we wanted to get all of the services that are in our catalog registered in PagerDuty, and so that we had an escalation policy and someone on call for the things that we run. And by having rich metadata in our catalog and using OpsLevel's custom actions or actions tooling, I was able to build a push button, register this service as a PagerDuty service, and set up an attach and escalation policy. And that's all you have to do. So for the services that were existing that didn't have this, it was come into OpsLevel, push a button, I'm now hooked up with PagerDuty. If you, in the future, stand up a new service and it gets registered in OpsLevel, you come in, you push a button, you're registered to PagerDuty. That automation is much easier to build when you have a good catalog with standards and metadata. It would have been much harder to do if we didn't have the catalog and we didn't have that ownership. And now I don't have to go do that or teach someone how to do that or write a documentation on how to go do that. I instead invested my time in building the tool, and people can self-service it.
Yeah, it actually is a great segue actually into our demo, which is how OpsLevel or presumably any dev portal can help you do these things. And at the foundation of, those of you who have not seen OpsLevel before, this is OpsLevel. I'd encourage you to go get a free trial and click around for yourself, docs, opslevel.com. Okay, so I think many of you have seen OpsLevel before. All of this sits, I think as Kyle was mentioning, on top of a catalog. And cataloging sounds very boring, but there is a critical piece to it, which is our experienced customers usually fall into one of two parts, which is either they automate the creation of their catalog, and that's a piece of great tooling they can then provide to other teams and other systems, or they need to work by hand using OpsLevel YAML or our UI or some other mechanism for teams to input it. But what that allows them to do is, as Kyle was describing, automate on top of that data. Once we have a list of all of our services, once we have a list and the metadata associated with those services, and it's API queryable, and it's ETL exportable, and you can use our CLI or our various providers, right? Thank you, Kyle and team, right? You can use all sorts of mechanisms to push that data in and get that data out. All of a sudden, you have also access to all sorts of automated functions on top of OpsLevel. So in our product itself, what that looks like is we have all these services, we have this metadata layer, we have an API that'll help you drive to these, right? You can script on top of it. Often what that looks like for customers is existing services come in through however we need to get them. And then subsequent services, it's automated. Subsequent services, there's an OpsLevel.yaml template in the root of the repo, and it just happens automatically as soon as you create a new repo. You just get an OpsLevel.yaml file, or you use our own service creation functionality to just create it from scratch, right? So you can use a template, create a new service, and it will just do it, right? Create the repo automatically. Should flag though is, so that's the first pillar here for us, is what is like of our ownership is we just have a list of all things that are owned. We can automate that creation, or we can leverage it to automate other things. The two other things I want to talk about in terms of automating workflows are defining ownership. So we talk about this in the context of service maturity is often the term that we use. There's a defining ownership, but what this looks like, what we're looking at here is, I think for a lot of devs teams, this is work that we're looking at here. Like, here's a bunch of tasks you have to do. Maybe a different framing is, here's what it means to own a service at our company. You need to do these things. You need to catalog your service, right? Make sure that there's data. Fundamental data is documented and available. You need to define SLIs and SLOs. You need to define runbooks. You need to make sure if you're a JavaScript service, you're running Node version 15 or above, right? These are things that are requirements to drive it. And so if you're saying you're running a service for the first time and say, what do I have to do? It's clear what you have to do. What you have to do is get your service to silver is what you have to do to own a service. And if you've done it, you've done it. Great job, right? Go, ship, deploy, build brilliant things that your customers will love, right? You're up to date. You're doing a great job. You don't have to do anything else. But that's the hope, is that we have a consolidated list of what it means to own a service. The final thing I'll talk about, and then we'll go to questions.
I have a great anecdote for this section too. So the other day I was actually building something new here at OpsLevel, and we have our rubric set out, and there's like this path that you need to take to get up to our top level. We actually have a fourth level called Platinum. And engineer reached out to me and saw that we had a service suggestion in our OpsLevel account. And I was like, oh yeah, that's right. We have this new repo that we're building something in. And so I registered the service in OpsLevel, and then I went to the maturity tab of the service and just followed the rubric. And in maybe an hour or 2 hours later, I had my service all the way up to Platinum. And this is something new that I just built. And that rubric, that maturity path, gets you up to speed quickly. And now I can focus on shipping my features now that I know I've taken care of all the base level things that we require of a service at OpsLevel. Yeah,
so to walk you folks through Kyle's workflow there, right? We pick up services from various different sources. If you don't just tell us about it, we can find them through deploys, through Git, through an integration, right? So you can create a service directly from here. And then once you're on the service itself, we're going to give you a consolidated list of what it means to actually own that service, right? Here's what's required of you. And you can hop over to your maturity report and see, right? In this case, looks like there's very much left for this service to do, but resolve these critical vulnerabilities, have the coners file, etc. Okay.
But it gives you that path, right? That path of like, just follow these things and you'll be much more mature than if you were just starting a service and you're not sure what to do next.
Yep. And then the last thing to talk about here is the button we actually have called self-serve. So whether or not this is true automation, we can quibble. But the idea is, I think having to hit a button is much more automated than not. But the idea is that we can trigger all sorts of actions directly from inside of OpsLevel. Rather than having to go learn another tool, do another thing, log into yet another tab, right? We can consolidate this information directly here. And these are going to be either global actions that are just run against code in general, or on a particular service. So looking at here is the full menu. Freeze deploys, right? Create a Bitbucket repo, run CI pipeline, open a new issue, right? There are all sorts of things. Customers get pretty creative with these. I think our own our own OpsLevel account has a number of incident response related ones. I don't think this demo account has. But there's all sorts of things you can do with these. And this is part of what we mean by it's automated. It's a better developer experience to do this rather than have to teach someone a new tool each time, or worse yet, have them reach out in Slack to have you do it for you. Okay.
Yes. So it allows you as the platform engineer or the security engineer or architect, principal engineer to build guardrails and build a happy path for doing certain actions that may be sensitive in your org or require escalated privileges. You can do it through this.
Yeah. So we can definitely talk more about any of these topics, but in the last 4 minutes or so, 3 minutes or so here, I wanted to see folks have questions. Feel free to throw them in the chat, throw them into the Q&A section. either about how we implement OpsLevel, any of the topics we talked to today, philosophical, practical, we're here and we're happy to chat. I see. Chat was disabled at the beginning of this. Thank you.
It's fine though now. People have talked in it. No Q&A questions yet. But we have one. You want me to read it for you?
Yeah.
How do you drive adoption and get developers to work OpsLevel into their day-to-day?
For me, for you, it's probably for me.
For you.
So, okay, this one quickly. I think the short answer here is often when we talk to customers, new customers, they're tempted to write an OpsLevel guide. And the answer is usually don't do that. Is usually our response. Like, we definitely do not encourage you to do that. We are going to be integrated into all sorts of other docs and other processes, right? You probably have a service creation guide somewhere in your org, or at least you probably should have one if you don't have one, depending on your scale. We hope to be a big part of that story. There's probably a run book for how incident response works at your company. Like, what do you do when you get paged? Again, maybe you don't have such a process or policy, but we want to be integrated. We want to be incorporated. That should be part of the story for onboarding a new employee, for going on call, for doing these operational tasks, for understanding what you have to do in a given sprint, right? All these things, these very sort of parts of your software development lifecycle, will live inside of OpsLevel. And when we talk about how to incorporate it into a day-to-day life, different customers leverage our product for different things. But at the end of the day, we hope to be the central source of truth for service information, service ownership definition, and developer self-serve. And we work with customers to get them to those three things. So my long answer to your short question, but hopefully that makes sense. I don't know, Kyle, if you have other thoughts on this one.
Yeah, I think you hit hit the nail on the head. Like, any run book that you have or documented process that you go through these steps, those are ripe for automation. And if you have the rich catalog metadata, it's easier to build those automations than when you don't. That's why you wrote the run book in the first place, is because you don't have that rich catalog of data to pull on to drive it. So any of these things that you would normally write down can be driven through automation generally, and the rich catalog metadata helps you get there more easily.
Okay, so we are at time, or almost at time. I think we can do one more question if there is one. If not, we can end this a little bit early. Not so early, but any final questions or thoughts? Okay, cool. Well, I'll reiterate again. If you're not yet an OpsLevel customer interested in learning more about this, our product, how we think about this, want to click around for yourself, you can go sign up for a trial at OpsLevel.com. If you are an existing OpsLevel customer, talk about how we can help drive automation. You're saying like, wow, this is some really cool stuff. Why doesn't our OpsLevel account have this? Great, come talk to us. Let's get that fixed. And our success team is very happy to help. So I think unless there's anything else, we'll end this here. Thanks everyone for taking the time, and we look forward to seeing you all in the future.
Have a good day.
Okay. Thanks, everyone.